TJump, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation.
Well, the pleasure's mine. Let me see. So, before we begin the discussion, if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you came to atheism. I think your story is a very interesting one, and we can contrast it with my position on theism. So, if you'd like to go ahead and begin, how you came to atheism, and then maybe I'll have some questions or I'll have some comments about it. Go ahead.
So I didn't identify as an atheist originally. I was born into a religious family and went to Catholic school, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and I lost my faith sometime in middle to late high school because none of my prayers were answered. At that point, I hadn't looked into any of the philosophy or the arguments. It was just purely based on feelings. And several years later, when I started to get into philosophy, is when I learned about atheism and the different positions and the arguments and identified and became a really true atheist.
Very interesting. So I think this is a good point, or a good point to differentiate how two people can come to examine the evidence and come to exactly or diametrically opposed conclusions. Because I was also raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools, never particularly religious, but there did come a point where I began to look into the evidence, to study the evidence. And the more I studied it, the more I became convinced that, objectively speaking, the Catholic position was the most rational. So it's very interesting because I think this is kind of a indicative, as a whole, in general, of the traditional and historical arguments for and against God, that there are some incredibly smart people on either side of the argument. And in the end, the argument or the decision of the person ends up being more of an emotional thing than a rational thing. Would you agree or disagree with this?
For some people, sort of. So I think that the way the human brain works, it's based on emotion. And if you lose the ability to have emotions, you lose the ability to rationalize too. So just by the way the human brain works, emotion is the primary center of the brain. But I really don't care about people's motivations. I care about if the arguments objectively work, regardless of people's motivations. So I don't think the motivations of why people convert is really irrelevant to whether or not there is actually evidence one way or the other. So like whether the evidence convinces people doesn't matter. It's evidence whether or not it convinces anyone.
Sure. What I mean is that the evidence or the lack of evidence is out there objectively in the world.
Yeah.
And there are some very, very bright people who say that evidence demonstrates that there is a God. And that there are some very, very bright people who conclude the opposite. So it seems, objectively speaking, looking at this realistically, objectively speaking, that would tell me that the final decision ultimately is based on something like emotion. Otherwise, there would be no incredibly intelligent people who look at the evidence and say, no, that there is a God.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Sure, but I don't think the decision part is what matters. Whether or not what convinces people isn't really important. What matters is, does the evidence objectively work?
Sure. I agree with you there. I suppose I can understand you too. And I think all of the historical and traditional arguments for theism, I can certainly put myself in the position of an atheist or an agnostic and completely understand. Because I've had some theist scientists on the podcast, and I take the devil's advocate position, despite the fact that I am a Catholic and a practicing Catholic. I take the devil's advocate position, and I argue that their arguments don't work, precisely because of what you've indicated previously, that they're not convincing. They're based on faith, or they're based on emotion. A faith and an emotion that I share, but I can be objective enough to see that the arguments don't work from a scientific or an objective standpoint. So I'm willing to concede that. And I think that's a good place to start the discussion. I'm going to offer a novel discussion today, and it's based on something more objective. And that objective basis is the fact that for the first time in human history, we are under the threat of a potential extinction event. It's non-zero possibility.
Like global warming?
So, no, nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, it could be any number of things. Could be global warming. I think with global warming, most people agree that it's not an extinction level event, but certainly an all-out nuclear war, most people agree that could be an extinction level event. But that's not the only thing. There's several other potential threats, none of which is really important at the moment. Only the fact that we are at a point in history where it is a potential threat. Are we willing to begin from objectively from this starting point?
Yes, humans could destroy themselves.
Okay, and do we agree that if humans destroyed ourselves, it's not a good thing? It would be better to not destroy ourselves than to destroy ourselves.
Depends on your view of objectivity. It's definitely subjectively bad. I don't know if the universe
From a
cares
human,
about it.
yes, no, I'm sorry. From a human perspective,
Yeah.
from a human perspective, objectively we can't know, but certainly from a human perspective, I think we agree that it's better to continue to exist than it is to not continue to exist.
Yes, most humans would agree.
Fantastic. Okay, and the ones who don't, interestingly enough, have a very simple solution, but the vast majority of them don't take it. And that turns around and it proves the point that humans prefer to be and continue.
The people I'm referring to are the ones who think all humans should die. So they don't just want to suicide, they want to kill all humans. That's their solution. So it's not quite as easy, but
I see. Okay, but we agree, you and I agree, that this is not a reasonable position, correct?
I don't know. Their position seems reasonable based on what they want. So I don't think it's not illogical. It's just I don't like it. I don't.
It's certainly not what most people want.
Yeah.
Right. If a person came forward and said, "I want everybody to die," the fact that the vast majority of people do not agree with them is something we can see, and we can agree on the positive side that it's not okay for humans to die.
Yes.
Correct?
Mass murdering the human race is not moral. Correct.
It's not a good thing. Sure, not a good thing. Okay, so my argument is going to be that the existence or non-existence of a God has important implications for this question. And this is what traditionally is called or referred to in religion as salvation. Okay, because if we can divide salvation into two different domains, salvation in some other domain, some other heavenly domain or some other afterlife, and salvation in this world, the one in which we actually live. We can't say anything meaningful from a scientific perspective about salvation outside of space and time. But what we can say from a scientific perspective is that in space and time, as we agreed earlier, it's better for humans to continue to exist than to not exist. Correct?
I mean, I guess. I mean, we could exist outside of space and time, or it's subjectively better.
Okay, but there's no evidence for that. Then you turn around and the argument you're using against theists, you're turning around and offering it for your own position. Right? There's no argument that we can live outside of space and time. There's no evidence.
Sure, but that's like, if you say it's better that we live in space and time than outside of space and time, then you would hold the burden on that one. So it might be better if we could live outside of space and time. I don't know.
Well, that's all speculative. But what's not speculative is that we don't want to cease existing in space and time. Right? If we can't begin there, then there's no
Well,
argument.
we don't want to cease existing. Many people do want to exist outside of space and time. That's not a
Okay, well, that's got many people believe in God. Well, that's the same argument.
yeah,
There's no evidence for that. It's without foundation. Their desire to live outside of space and time is there's absolutely no evidence for that,
well, there doesn't
right?
need to be. Like it's not saying that we need to show that that place actually exists. It's just what they want. So it's they don't actually need to show that that thing is real to have the desire.
Okay, so I understand what you mean, but going back to the ground or the foundation, for the vast majority of humans, we don't want to die
Sure,
in a nuclear war, for example.
sure.
Okay, that threat is real. Okay, so on a planet that's full of nuclear weapons and where other types of threats are um, threatening the human race, right? My argument is that the position, and this is where we might differ, the position that there is no God, there is no evidence for God, can be understood analogously in the following way. Imagine two people, two adults at the side of a lake. They both are, let's say they're both parents. Their children are swimming in the lake, and the children are drowning, right? And so the theist position is, let's save the children, analogously. Let's save the children. Let's jump in, swim after them, get them out of the water. The atheist position, again against this background of potential human extinction, is you can't prove to me that there is no God. To me, it's about as useless or senseless to argue this as it is to argue in that emergency situation that there is no God. In other words, we're in a predicament as a species, right? So the thing is, how are we going to get out of this predicament? How are we going to figure out a way to govern ourselves, to manage the planet, to get rid of the nuclear weapons so that we are not under threat of extinction? That is the number one question for all humans at the moment, right? Because we agreed that we don't want to go extinct. But there is a potential or several potential extinction level threats that we're facing. And the atheist position is, you can't prove to me that there is no God.
What's the analogy here? Like, so
The
yeah,
analogy is,
I agree. We have to find a solution to the problems, but whether or not God
sure,
exists isn't the position on God isn't a solution one way or the other.
it is based on what I'm going to argue today.
Oh,
So
okay.
what I'm doing is setting up the foundation, right? So let me review.
Okay.
We've agreed that historical and traditional arguments for and against God are inconclusive. They're not definitive.
Sure.
There's many smart, very smart people that look at the evidence and say, I believe there's a God. And there's many smart people who look at the evidence and say, there is no God, and you can't prove that there is a God. And the people who believe in God can't prove that there is a God in any definitive scientific way.
Sure.
So what I'm going to argue today is that the argument for God offers something of value to our predicament as a species facing the threat of extinction.
What is that?
I'm sorry?
What is the thing of value that it adds that atheism doesn't add?
I'm going to describe it in the next few minutes. Okay, but I wanted to set that up first. That's the argument.
Okay, could you?
So your traditional approach is that tell me why you believe in God, and I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense, right?
Well, the argument you're making, the pragmatic argument, is very similar to Pascal's wager, to Claire Kinshaw's argument that we need to have Islamic religion instituted because it's better for society. It's very similar to many arguments, but you still haven't presented the argument yet. So it's kind of like, I'm still waiting. What is the argument? What is the thing that religion provides that atheism doesn't? Because I don't know of any such thing.
Okay, so there's several different steps and several different levels of abstraction. There's quite a complexity here that's based on theoretical physics and moves through social choice theory and political philosophy, also voting theory. So before I get into the details of that, I'm going to try to speak in a very, not necessarily analogical way, but simplistic way about what the argument is. The argument in religion is that we're made in the image and likeness of God. There is now research at the cutting edge of theoretical physics that demonstrates with fairly compelling mathematical force that there is a symmetry between the way information is processed in the human brain and the way information is processed in nature. So there is a symmetry between the way physics works at the fundamental particle physics level and the way the cosmos functions.
Well, sure,
so this
our brain is a part of the cosmos. So yeah.
Exactly. So there's a mathematical symmetry. Understanding this mathematical symmetry leads us to resolve some of the biggest open questions in political philosophy and social choice theory. Specifically in social choice theory.
How does quantum physics have anything to do with political theory?
Because of the symmetry. The symmetry between quantum physics and specifically string theory is based on a mathematics. Okay, that mathematics is symmetrical all the way out through various scales in nature. So that's the contention. For example, let me give you an analogy. The way an apple falls to the earth is mathematically symmetrical to the way a supermassive black hole behaves in the universe, in the cosmos. They're symmetrical, mathematically symmetrical. They're both gravitational in nature. Gravity is what's governing both. So there's a symmetry.
How does that connect to politics, though?
Because politics is also, first of all, because we're physical, right? And politics, especially social choice theory and voting theory, is based on mathematics. So for example, we come to politics now based on every person has one vote. That's the general idea. It's one person, one vote, right? There's a mathematics there. But that mathematics has no symmetry whatsoever with the symmetry that governs gravity or governs the cosmos.
Right. So there's no symmetry between the politics and the physics.
No symmetry between one person, one vote. But if you adjust the math, adjust the voting theory, there can be a symmetry. So that if you base your voting theory on the inverse square law, so that some people have a square of the voting power that other people have, right? Then you approximate the symmetry that exists in nature. Okay, so and you resolve, in addition, you resolve some of the biggest open questions in social choice theory. This is not just speculation. This is actual, real mathematical solutions that have been demonstrated.
Wait, so how does this? Obviously, we could give people a square more powerful or less powerful of a vote. Like we do that. That's what the Electoral College does in the states. But what is? I mean, this doesn't solve any problems because the problems are what is the most fair system, and nothing in physics answers that question.
So yeah, I disagree with you. This is the argument that physics does answer this question, and specifically, Arrow's impossibility theorem is a theorem that founded the modern academic field of social choice. Kenneth Arrow in about 1950 got a Nobel Prize for demonstrating mathematically why democracy is impossible. So they call it the impossibility theorem.
Yeah, I know
So
it's the voting thing where you can't get all
exactly,
desired properties in voting because one
exactly.
law is contradicts another.
So he demonstrated that it's impossible, right? Because they're contradictory. But what this does by using the physics by using the math that comes from physics, you resolve Arrow's impossibility theorem, and you resolve other open questions about political theory and political philosophy. That's the
Well,
idea.
if you could actually solve that and write a paper that demonstrates how you solve that, that'd be great. But
There's
the
several
reason,
paper. There's several papers that are written on this. Several.
well, if there was actually a solution to Arrow's impossibility theorem, it would have been refuted. Not.
No, that's not the case. Anybody who's willing, and we can put links in the description. You can look at the work of Glenn Weil, as an economist from valedictorian at the University of Princeton, then went on to the University of Chicago, then is now with Microsoft and Microsoft Research, and he's done extensive work with some of the world's top mathematicians and statisticians on precisely what I'm talking about. So the idea that this hasn't been proven is just not true. It has been
You could
proven.
say
Has
that,
been.
but I just don't believe you. Like I'm pretty familiar with the field. It just hasn't. It's not accepted by the consensus. That's just
Okay, so we'll leave that as a pending. All right. So if it's not true, then my whole argument falls apart. If it is true, then my argument upholds.
well. Let's say that somebody solved Arrow's impossibility theorem. How does this indicate a god?
Okay, that's part of the argument. Part of the argument. But Arrow's impossibility theorem has not only been resolved by Glenn Weil in his work. It's also been solved by others, by Amartya
How does it being
Sen.
solved is that evidence of God? Like I still haven't heard your argument yet. Where is the thing that theism provides that atheism doesn't?
Okay, it provides, first of all, the solution to Arrow's impossibility theorem. Second of all,
So God provides the solution? Because
no, nature does. Nature does.
Yeah, so you don't need God for that. That comes, both physics does that and God does that.
Sure. You can argue, a person can take my argument. If a person could come up with it, my argument is just as powerful an argument for atheism as against atheism.
So it's not evidence of a God?
No, because to actually carry out the plan requires a God. And it also resolves salvation, right? We're talking about avoiding human extinction.
So we can avoid a human extinction without a God.
The argument is that we can't.
Why would it be impossible to avoid human extinction without a God?
Because it requires an intervention into human history outside of space and time. I haven't gotten to the physical argument yet. So all of this is based on an argument that comes outside of space and time. It's understanding of the nature of space and time. If you understand the nature of space and time, then you understand how a person acting outside of space and time can enter into space and time to get us out of this predicament that nobody else can.
Why do we need an intervention outside of space and time to save humanity from extinction?
Because we can't do it ourselves.
Why? Because it seems like we can. I don't see a problem to think that we can with technology.
Then the burden of proof would be on you to demonstrate how.
As science progresses, we can solve things like making a way to disable nuclear weapons and can increase technology to provide food and cure health diseases. Like, there's lots of ways. I don't understand.
That's all fine in theory, but in practice, it's a whole different story.
How?
Because in theory, that argument was offered before nuclear weapons were developed, right? That's the argument of from the beginning of science. That's been the argument.
Yeah, and it's still applied to after nuclear weapons have been developed.
Okay, but science have developed the nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's contradictory.
No.
So we can do it. We can, in theory, we can. In theory, we didn't have to develop the nuclear weapons, but we did in practice.
So you can have a technology that builds weapons and builds things that defeats those weapons, like shields. They're not. It doesn't mean that the field itself is giving contradictory answers. It just means it's a diverse field.
Sure, but you never get rid of the threat.
Yeah, yeah, you do. Like currently, we've gotten rid of the threat of spears because spears can't do anything because we have guns, so they're not really a threat anymore. Um, so we can get rid of the threat. It's definitely possible.
Well, but make it worse, right? We've gotten rid of spears, but we've gotten guns, and we've got nuclear weapons. So we can get rid of nuclear weapons, but it has to be worse.
No, that's one of the solutions. So there's other solutions too, like
For example,
give everyone personal force fields, give everyone their own universe, upload brains into a consciousness, into a
but there's
mind.
absolutely no evidence for this. There's no evidence. Then you get into
Personal force
the
fields. There's lots of evidence. We have already started to build them.
no personal force fields. You may be able to do that, but there's no evidence that we can build personal force fields that would protect humanity from extinction. Right?
Well,
There's no evidence
it
of
would
that.
protect us from nukes. That's the personal force fields protect humans from nukes. That's possible. We can do that because we've shown that force fields can do that. That's what the electromagnetic field does. But protect us from extinction. Like I imagine that would be like solving death. Like yeah, we can do that too. That's like Nick Bostrom's argument for.
Well, many
solving
people
aging.
argue. Many people argue this, but it's
Well, there's tons and tons of evidence for it. Like we've recently
parallel to the, but it's parallel to the argument for
no,
God.
this is not parallel to the argument from God because we have tons of evidence for solving aging. Like we've recently done in mice, we've extended the lifespan of mice by 25 to 50% by changing the telomeres, by adding in younger telomeres. So we are solving aging. That's a thing we're definitely working on. We're making lots of progress on it. The human lifespan has been extended by what 400% over the past 100,000 years. Like yeah, we're making tons of progress on this. We will pretty much guarantee to solve this problem.
I agree with you there. I think the aging and the death problem is a technology problem, but there's no guarantee that we won't destroy ourselves before we have that technology.
Sure.
Right? That's precisely the point. That's the point.
What's the point there? Because like there's no guarantee that we won't destroy ourselves before God will save us.
No, then it's a matter of a preponderance of evidence, right? There's one thing to hope and wish that we can make
evidence of what?
Of evidence that there is a mechanism through which we can avoid human extinction, right? It's one thing to say, no, we'll solve aging. We'll be able to live forever. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to actually provide the mechanisms, the academic mechanisms to get there and the description of how to do it.
Sure, but
and to resolve.
So I would agree with you there, but I'd say that the only evidence we have of the only method that can do that is science. I don't see any other method that has provided any basis to do that other than science.
I agree. There is only science. There is only physics. There only is physics.
But so my
argument is say physics. The argument is that we can't.
Yeah, that's so. In order to solve human extinction, we need science. Science we do perfectly well without a God. So it seems like we're moving towards solving human extinction without a God. It's fine.
It seems that way, but you have to, if that's your claim, then you have to demonstrate, and let's compare, right? Like going back to the original analogy of two people standing by the pool, right? I love the progress that we're making here, by the way. It seems slow, but we're making good progress, especially for this being a novel argument. Going back to the original analogy, two people standing by a lake, the children are drowning, right? One of them has a proposal, the other person has a proposal. That's a question of, okay, let's use logic and science to compare and contrast the proposals,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Right? So my argument is that atheism has no proposal. It's a completely vacuous philosophical reaction to our predicament as a
Sure.
species.
Well, yeah,
That's my
I'm
position.
happy to agree with you there, because atheism is simply just rejecting God. Like, there are other
Sure.
things like humanism and scientific theories and naturalistic pantheism that all offer solutions to these. Atheism itself obviously doesn't, because
Okay, well,
it's
in that case, let's group in humanism and all of the other possibilities that you say exist, because they would have to, as far as I know, and I've been listening and paying attention to this for quite a while. All of the major thinkers on the planet who are studying this never come up with a solution. They always say, "I don't
transhumanism.
have the solution."
The solution is transhumanism.
Okay, transhumanism is a theory, but there's no evidence for it. There's no evidence that
There's tons of evidence. Like, we've
that,
installed chips into brains. We've installed machines as arms. We've replaced parts of your brain with machines. Like, this is a very well-known thing. Lots of evidence.
okay, then maybe we mean different, or we're talking about different things when you say transhumanism. I
Transhumanism
was
means overcoming biology by making our bodies mechanical in one way, uploading our consciousness to computers, putting ourselves in positions where we can't die, solving aging through technological means. These are transhumanism.
okay. So in that case, it would be a question of, again, going back to the analogy, comparing the proposal of transhumanism and how realistic it is, right? Because the children are drowning, with what's being proposed here
Yeah,
today. Okay.
sure.
And so now I'd like to jump into physics, the physical foundations of this, because transhumanism theoretically may be attractive to you or to many other people. But one of the deficits, I would say, of transhumanism is that it doesn't reconcile, or it doesn't answer to some of the biggest open questions in physics.
Well, it doesn't need to. Like, neither does a God. But the problem here is we need a solution to human extinction, and to solve human extinction, you don't need to solve all the problems in physics.
No, but if you can solve all the problems, not all the problems, but the major problems in physics, and in addition, provide a logical solution to the problem of human extinction, then I would argue it's a more attractive argument than transhumanism, which is theoretical and solves or says nothing about the physical nature of reality.
Well, that would only be like if the goal is to solve extinction, then it doesn't matter what else the theory can do as long as it solves extinction. Like, so whether or
No,
not it
because
can solve other problems doesn't make a difference.
I would disagree with you there, because if you have a solution and your solution is based on philosophy, is one thing. But if your solution is based on physics, it's a completely different argument. It's a much more sounder.
No, like, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, if the goal, like, if your goal is to screw in a light bulb, and the best way to screw in a light bulb has nothing to do with, like, the fundamental laws of physics, then you don't need to know the fundamental laws of physics to screw in the light bulb. It's just
But
not
in this
relevant.
case, it's
So
not,
so like
in this case, it's,
like
I'm not sure that
Einstein's
analogy
theory of
works.
Einstein's theory of general relativity. If you can come up with a mathematical model to screw in a light bulb, that's sure. But is that required? No. Does it benefit the theory that it can do that? No. Like, Newtonian mechanics does it just fine. Like, we just use Newtonian mechanics. Like, what makes a good theory is if it can solve the problem. Whether or not it can do other stuff doesn't matter.
I think I disagree with that, and I think most people would disagree with that. I think what we have a natural thirst to understand things, And the more we understand things, certainly in the scientific tradition, the goal is to understand things at a fundamental level, not just to solve things. Of course, we're happy with quantum mechanics because it just works, and that's wonderful. And it leads to great technology, but we're still after there's a primordial thirst to understand why quantum mechanics works or why it behaves the way it does. This is fundamental to the human experience. Otherwise, we wouldn't be engaging in science the way we are today. I think it's better to have the solution and a fundamental understanding of how nature works. It's obviously better.
So, like, if you're saying that the God hypothesis solves fundamental physics and science can't, I mean, that's an argument, I think, but again, I'd say science does it better. And science provides a better solution to human extinction. But I still say science does both of those better than God.
Okay, so then the burden of proof is on you to resolve quantum mechanics. I'm sorry, not reconcile quantum mechanics with general relativity.
That's what scientists are working on. Theism doesn't do it, but science, the best solutions there are scientific, not theistic.
I disagree with that. And I'm going to now start my argument about how theism, the conceptual understanding of the existence of God, and the symmetry that exists between humans and the cosmos provides that solution.
Solves the problem of quantum gravity?
Sure. Conceptually solves the problem of quantum gravity.
Well, all math is conceptual, so all mathematical models would potentially, if there was a mathematical model that did this, that would solve it conceptually too. So like string theory solves it conceptually, but I'm not sure, like, go on, explain to me how God can do this.
So the concept of God, especially a salvific God, who enters in
salvation, salvation.
Yeah, a salvific God provides a solution, and precisely through two of the soundest pillars in theoretical physics today, or candidates for a resolution to the problem between quantum mechanics and general relativity. One is string theory. You've mentioned string theory. And string theory is the leading candidate to do this, right? Right. So string theory is like the best that humans have been able to do on this scientific trajectory to understand nature, right? So after 400 years of rigorous science, string theory is the leading candidate for how to understand nature. Problem with string theory is it can't be tested so far, and it leads to things that are apparently incomprehensible, such as the fact that we live in a holographic universe, the fact that there are multiple dimensions, or the idea that there are multiple dimensions. That's the problem with string theory. It can't be tested, multiple dimensions, holographic universe, etc.
So
that's one pillar.
Well, that seems to be less bad than God here. So all of those things have a better, stronger basis in reality than God does. So why would God be better than any of those things?
Well, fantastic that we agree that this is all founded on reality. This has a very solid basis on reality. What's missing is an understanding of what that means, what it is. Okay?
What reality is?
No, what 10 dimensions or multiple dimensions, a holographic universe, and the fact that we can't demonstrate it, we can't test it.
Well, I know what those are. Those are mathematical constructs that are derived from the math of reality or of physics. But that's better than God. So all the properties in God are not grounded in physics. All the properties in string theory are grounded in physics. So I would agree with what you said earlier. Having it grounded in physics is better than not having it grounded in physics. So string theory would be better than God.
Yes, thank you. I agree that string theory would be better than God as a word. But if you can explain God and in string theoretical terms, then that's better than not being able, I'm sorry, than string theory just as it is at the moment, that we can't understand what it means to live in a holographic universe. We can't understand what it means to be multiple dimensional, to live in a multiple dimensional universe, and that we can't test it. Okay, so all three of those things.
Like we understand both of them. The holographic principle just means that you can represent information on a 3D sphere without having to have it in a 3D space. So that means that all of the information in a 3D space can be represented on a sphere, on a 2D plane going around in a sphere around it. That's all it means. And dimensions, like we live in a 4-dimensional space-time right now. String theory's extra dimensions are just more of that. It's the exact same thing. It just means that like when you scroll down to the atomic level, essentially your eyesight's just going to expand to extra dimensions like you're looking through a 360-degree camera. That's all it means. It's not particularly complex.
Okay. Obviously, many people disagree with you that it's particularly complex. I mean, you've explained what it is on a very superficial level, but what does that mean in terms of the reality that we live in, or what significance does it have for our ultimate goal, which is to avoid human extinction? And
Nothing.
that's where
physics has nothing to do with solving human transhumanism.
See, that's where we disagree. The symmetry that I mentioned earlier between a animal brain and the way information is processed in the universe, if we understand that symmetry, right, the actual cosmos itself, right, at the very outer boundary of that two-dimensional universe, there's a copy of everything inside, right, of that universe. That's what the holographic principle is. That
No,
we live
it
inside
says
of
it can be. It says it can't. All of the information in a 3 or 4-dimensional space can be represented on a sphere.
Can be represented on a sphere.
Doesn't mean
exactly.
It is, though. It doesn't. It's not like that's only in the case of a black hole. In a black hole, that's the case. That's why there's no information loss. But it's not the case for like Earth unless we're inside of a black hole.
No, I'm talking about the cosmos,
right,
as a whole, right? So going back to the concept, that we're made in the image of God, this lends credence to the idea because we are, in some sense, as the human brain or animal brains in general, we receive information from the exterior and it processes into the brain. And through that information, we come up with everything that we experience as humans or as animals, right? Through the information that comes in through the 5 senses.
Yeah,
right?
That
Information
doesn't have anything to do with the holographic principle.
Sure it does. In a very rough spherical cow kind of way. In physics, spherical cows are common. Do you know the
Lawrence
concept
Krauss.
of a spherical?
The spherical cow is a Lawrence Krauss thing, but this doesn't have anything to do with like the fact that we gain information from our outside senses. We don't gain information from the holographic principle. We gain information from the external world, which isn't holographic. So it doesn't. I don't. Like,
no, there's a in a very spherical cow. The idea of a spherical cow, and it's very common in physics, not just with Lawrence Krauss, with physics in general, is that physicists use very simplified
representations. Yes,
representations to get an idea across. And the idea across is that humans or animals in general are made in the image and likeness of God. Okay, so that's what string theory is telling us, that we are, because we process information from the exterior world into, and that information hits that outer boundary, and it becomes like you said, the exterior of a black hole, it becomes like a copy of everything inside that black hole. So all of the information that ever enters into the human brain, right, is then transformed into everything we experience inside of that brain. This is physically the case, necessarily so.
So you can
Everything
make
we
an analogy between we get information, God is an information thingy, therefore we're like God.
No, the analogy is we get information from the exterior world, right? That information is then processed in ways we don't understand today inside of our brain to yield everything we experience as humans. So everything internal to us comes in some sense from the boundary of our brain through the five senses.
Yeah, it's an analogy. So
Okay.
we can come up with analogies. Analogies aren't
Okay.
evidence.
The analogies aren't evidence, but the mathematics that comes from this provides the solutions that we're looking for to Arrow's impossibility theorem and to many of the open questions in sociology.
What math comes from an analogy?
In hadron physics, there is if you look at the formula for a fundamental string, you'll find that the square, the quadratic math, plays a critical role in that. Just as gravity falls off as the inverse square of the distance of one object to the other, in the same way, that physics is reflected, that math is reflected in the fundamental string, in string theory. So that physics cascades throughout.
There's no analogy there. Like, we just know that our brains are in reality. All of reality operates in the same physical way. Therefore, our brains operate the same way everything else does. Like, there's no analogy here. It's just our brains are physical.
Sure. No. The analogy is that we're made in the image and likeness of God. The analogy is that all of the traditional historical arguments for God start to make sense in a way that is much more useful and practical for humanity than what science or humanism or atheism can provide. That's the argument.
How? Because all this is also explained by physics. Like, we're made in the image of stars because we have the exact same physics as stars. So physics explains all this too. I'm not seeing what any of this has to do with God.
Well, if you allow me to take the next step, right? So what I've argued so far is that there is a symmetry between information processing in animal brains and the way information is processed in the universe itself, in nature.
Because they're literally the same thing. Like, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this corresponds to the traditional Christian argument that we're made in the image and likeness of God. Right? It corresponds.
If you want to make that into an analogy, you can make.
There's a conceptual.
What is this?
There's a conceptual symmetry there. Okay. So again, our goal is to get to the salvation and to compare. Ultimately, what we want to do is compare what results from seeing this theistically versus humanistically. So then ultimately what we want to do is compare transhumanism and the proposals of transhumanism with the proposals I'm going to set forth today and in any future arguments if I set them forth. Okay, so that's the goal. Do we agree on that?
Sure.
Okay, so the other string theory is one pillar. Another pillar is known as the two-state vector formalism. The two-state vector formalism is put out by several people, but the primary proponent is a physicist by the name of Yakir Aharonov, one of the most respected and accomplished physicists in the world. He's an Israeli physicist. And just by coincidence, not coincidence, just as an interesting aside, all of the physics here that I'm mentioning, all of the physics here is absolutely disproportionately put out by Israeli physicists. It's just a curious aside.
Yeah,
it's a curious aside.
More PhDs and Nobel Prizes than everybody else.
They're incredibly intelligent. In other words, it's just an interesting aside that the Jewish people who put out the Bible in the first place are now, several thousand years later, also putting out the leading ideas in physics and pretty much every science, right? But all of the physics that I'm talking about today, coincidentally enough, is disproportionately Jewish. Yakir Harnov, Einstein, Susskind, Witten. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah,
Especially
all
with
throughout
the hologram.
history, there was one group of people who were the ones who made the biggest contribution to the field. It used to be Christians in the Enlightenment, and then before that it was Muslims, and then before that it was the Chinese. So yes, there are the people who are the most educated in the field are the ones making the most progress in the field. Sure.
Okay, but that doesn't cover the why the impact of the Old Testament and the Jewish religion. Of all the different religions and all the different ideas that have ever been concocted by humanity, we happen to be dominated by a set of Jewish stories.
Just because of war, they won the wars.
Okay, there might be many different causes, but we can't escape the fact that it's the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. And in any case, that was just an aside. I was talking about Yakir Haranov and his two-state vector formalism. What he does with his two-state vector formalism is he resolves another one of the biggest mysteries in physics is the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. So the idea that when you delve more deeply into the fundamental nature of particle physics, you get to a point where a particle is not in one location. It's in several locations and in many locations at the same time. So one of the biggest mysteries for the last century has been, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't correspond to the way the world behaves. And it's an outstanding problem for many. For myself and other people like Yakir Aharonov, it's resolved. And I think it's really interesting because the way he resolves it is he's saying, and I agree with him, because there's not two of you in different places. There's only one of you. In this world, there's only one of you. You're sitting on your sofa at home and we're having a conversation. There's not another one in you in another universe. And there's no evidence for that. It's a framework that's offered, right? The many worlds or the multiverses, but there's no evidence for that, and it can't be tested. So what he says, and I agree with him, it's nonsense. Even if there are many worlds, the one we're concerned about is this one, not other worlds. We're concerned about this one. And I would say the same argument against transhumanism. We're not talking about possibilities. We're talking about here and now. So what he does is he posits that there's not only...
How is that an objection to transhumanism? Because transhumanism is a model that's used to apply to the future of this world. So it does apply to this world.
Sure, but not to here and now.
Nothing in science applies to here and now. It's all about the future. Like Thomas Edison, when he invented the electricity, and the Queen asked, well, what can we use this for? He's like, I have no idea, but in the future you could tax it. All of our electricity was based on something someone built and then had no idea how it was going to be applied in the future. So that's not an argument against transhumanism. Transhumanism would still be a better solution to solving humans' problems because it will be applied in the future like everything in science.
Okay, we're getting sidetracked. Let me come back to let's leave that aside. Forget I said that. Let's put that on hold. Okay. And come back to Yakir Haranov and his idea that in order to resolve the measurement problem, what he posits is that there's not only one wave function. He posits one wave function that comes from the past, in other words, from the Big Bang, and it moves forward, and another wave function that comes from the future and is moving backwards in time. So this meeting of the past and future wave functions is what we experience as now or as reality. And he resolves the measurement problem in this way. And this is interesting because this corresponds exactly to how humans experience reality.
How does this solve the measurement problem? Because the measurement problem hasn't been solved. It's just, there's not a solution to it.
That's not true. Sean Carroll claims to have solved the measurement problem through the many worlds interpretation. Sean Carroll and many others, right? They say that it's solved through many universes. We live in one of a potentially infinite number of universes where Tom is not speaking English today, he's speaking Spanish. And he's not wearing glasses, he's not wearing glasses. And Luis is, this is just, it may be true, but it has no relevance for this world, the one we're in now. Okay, so that's one claim to solve the measurement problem. The other one is Yakira Haranov. The difference between these two is that the many worlds interpretation has absolutely no relevance for anything that matters to us. Whereas Yakira Haranov's solution does. That's the argument. Yakira Haranov says we solve the measurement problem by understanding that the future and the past come together to create the present. So if I were to freeze the universe now, mid-sentence, okay, so it's frozen now. I'm in the middle of a sentence. Why is the universe in this particular configuration? One set of causes comes from the past, from the Big Bang, right? The Big Bang caused, brought space and time into being, caused the planets to evolve, brought life on Earth, etc. The other set of causes that explains why I'm in this particular situation, in this particular sentence, is because I have a goal. That goal isn't here yet. I'm trying to get there. With every sentence I utter, I'm trying to get to that goal. But that goal is in some sense causing every one of my sentences to be uttered in a specific way that it's uttered. Okay, so this idea that past and future come together to create reality corresponds to how we experience reality in this world.
Not really.
And
what does that have to do with God?
It has everything to do with God because it's symmetrical, right? Yakira Haranov is demonstrating how humans are symmetrical to the way, to nature. So it demonstrates that, how we're made in the image and likeness of God.
I mean, we're a part of nature, so obviously we're symmetrical with nature. What does it have to do with God?
Okay, this, again, it corresponds to the idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and that God, only God, has the power to enter into history to get us out of this situation, to get us out of this predicament. And then it's just a matter of, okay, comparing and contrasting. You say transhumanism can do it. Fantastic. Let's meet another day and let's lay forth the argument of how transhumanism contributes to the biggest problems that we're having as a species, and we'll compare and contrast. Then the debate comes different, right? So my argument is that not only that only a God entering into history, solving mathematically and physically some of the biggest problems that we're having in the various branches of science, but also getting us out of this predicament that we're in of potential extinction. That's the argument that I'm laying forth for God, that I'm setting forth for God today. In addition to this framework resolves all of the major objections that historically have been made against the idea that there is a God. For example, the problem of evil, and the problem of evil is the major one, but it resolves the problem of evil. How there can exist an all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful God and evil at the same time.
Well, I'm still not seeing the one thing that theism provides that atheism doesn't. So all of physics is all atheism. All of the comparison, all of the analogy between human brains and information in the universe, all physics, no God. Transhumanism can solve the afterlife, no God. So all of this can be done with no God.
In theory, again, we'd have agreed that we'd have to compare and contrast. Going back to the original analogy of two people standing by the lake and the kids are drowning, okay, let's compare what transhumanism has to say, and let's compare what's being proposed here. Okay. I think that's fantastic, right? And we'll see which one is more logical, or which one more is sounder. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. At least we've gotten to this point where, in my past discussions with atheists, they're not even willing to concede any of this. They're not willing to concede. I think it's just an emotional argument. So I think, much to your credit, you've been able to concede that we need to avoid human extinction, and one potential solution to that is transhumanism, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's you're not seeing it because I haven't laid it out clearly. This is the first time I've tried to get it out as clearly as possible. But those are the claims that are being made. If you'd like, we can continue today, or you can give it some thought, or you can ask me questions or objections that you might have.
Well, I'd still need evidence that there was something like I think you said compare the models. Like what we need to compare the models. Like I still see science is obviously better at everything, and theism doesn't accomplish anything.
No, you can't argue for science because I'm arguing for science. So we're both arguing science.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
So
the
I'm
difference
saying a
is
scientific world with no God seems to be able to do everything you've asked for and do it better than any model of God.
the person of God. That's the difference, right? There's a scientific model because God does not act through anything other than science, right? But science alone, without the person of God, then there's a missing actor,
Missing
right? We
actor.
can,
Like so we don't
yes,
need physics works fine with no actors. Why would we need an actor?
because we're trying to save ourselves.
We don't need an actor to save ourselves. We are the actor.
Okay, then we come back to the argument that, okay, produce your argument. Let's see
I
what
just
your
did.
argument is. Transhumanism.
Yeah. Science.
Again, you can't say science because I'm using science too.
Science without God can do it just
No,
fine.
no, no, no. But God and science is the same thing. It's semantics. Semantics.
Science doesn't have any kind of intentionality to it. So there's no intentionality required for science.
You don't know this. You don't know this.
Yeah, because science was invented by humans.
Okay. You mean nature does have intentionality to it, according to the work of Yakir Haranov and his resolution to the measurement problem. Nature does have intentionality because there's a future that's coming back to cause the present.
Okay.
Okay, so science as an activity, no, but nature certainly does. Science as a human activity doesn't have intentionality objectively, or in other words, seen objectively, seen abstractly. You can't say science has intentionality, but the humans practicing science certainly do, and nature appears to have intentionality, again, based on the work of Yakir Haranov. And not only Yakir Haranov, this squares with our experience of reality, number one, common sense. And number two, it goes back to the beginning of philosophy with Aristotle's four causes, right? One of them being final cause. There's a final cause to things, right? What causes a cup is my intention to create that cup.
So your argument is that nature has intentionality, mind best explains intentionality, something like that?
No, nature has intentionality, and this explains some of the biggest puzzles in physics.
So it's false. Nature does not have intentionality. So you can posit that. There's no evidence for it. It's not in any way accepted by anybody in physics. So that's just false.
Well, I disagree with you completely.
You don't get to disagree. We can just check the poles of physics.
Sure. Yakir Haranov is one of the most respected physicists in the world.
That's a field of authority.
One of the most...
His respect doesn't matter. Like what matters is what is the consensus of the experts in the field. It is not that there is any intentionality. There is no evidence. That's
also a fallacy because
which fallacy?
At one point there was a consensus in physics that the steady state was real, and that consensus turned out to be false.
That's not a fallacy. So appeal to consensus is not a fallacy. You can just Google Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's fallacies, section 9 and 10. Fallacy, and Argumentum ad populum fallacy is only applying to like average people, and an appeal to authority is only when they're not actual authorities. Appeal to consensus is not a fallacy. It is the most reliable source that we have. So no, it's not a fallacy.
Okay, let's not call it a fallacy. Let's not say that you can't be certain of it.
Sure.
Because in the past, consensus has often been wrong.
Consensus is the least wrong of anything ever.
Okay, but it's not always right.
Yes, that means anything else you posit is going to be more likely to be wrong.
Sure, I can accept that. I can accept that. But there does appear to be some error in logic in the sense that there is a growing consensus in physics that we live in one of multiple universes. Right? There's no basis in reality for this.
Yeah, there is.
It's a mathematical argument.
Well, the multiverse hypothesis is a combination of two things in physics. One is vacuum states, which has been confirmed through the Casimir effect, so we have empirically demonstrated vacuum states exist. Second is Guth's early universe inflation, which was empirically demonstrated by observations in the cosmic microwave background. If you combine those two principles, you get the multiverse. So it's not like all of that has a basis in physics. That has a very good, strong grounding.
Okay, but it's not testable.
It doesn't need to be. It's a combination of things in physics that are testable. So it's a combination of testable things. Combination of testable things better than adding anything new. Nothing.
Okay, so then why the objections to string theory then?
Because it's not. Well, it's a similar theory. So string theory is still better than God.
I would argue with that. It depends on what you mean by God. The argument I've laid forward today is that they're basically synonymous.
So I define God as a non-physical mind that created the universe.
Okay.
Would you disagree? Would you define God differently?
I don't think God is non-physical. I think God is physical.
Okay, but he'd still be like a mind that created the universe of some kind?
I would say the creator, the cause of the universe, the creator of the universe. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a mind that created the universe.
Yeah, a mind, a person, sure. I haven't given it much thought.
Okay.
But the traditional definition of God works for me, certainly from a Catholic perspective.
Okay, so that
creator
definition
of the
of
universe.
God, putting in a mind that created the universe, is a worse model than any kind of atheistic model that doesn't have that. The atheistic models can solve everything in physics and all transhumanism better than any mind hypothesis that there's some kind of mind that created the universe.
Well, that's your opinion, but if the God hypothesis, the God concept, is virtually synonymous with string theory and these two-state vector formalism, then what you're saying is not true. It's false.
Sure, but it's definitely not. So we know that nothing in string theory says there's a mind that created the universe. That's not in string theory at all.
No, but you don't have to be. It doesn't have to be in string theory for it to be. There's a practice in physics, and Feynman talks about this a lot.
Well, you said that this was synonymous with string theory. Like string theory doesn't say mind anywhere.
That's the argument I'm laying forth here.
You're saying
and this is
you're presenting a model of string theory that does have a mind. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Here's what I'm saying, and this is an important point. Feynman, who is one of the most one of the biggest names in physics, respected physicists of the past, maybe in history, right? Feynman and any number of other physicists today commonly or often understand and repeat the idea that in physics, interpretation is critical. Interpretation is critical. You can take the same exact phenomena, the same exact physics, and understand it in several different equivalent ways.
Yes, it's known as the
But
problem of
and
underdetermination.
Feynman allow me to finish, please. Feynman says any good physicist is open to any number of different interpretations because he doesn't know from where the next interpretation or breakthrough is going to come. So what I'm offering here is you can understand string theory as not mind, or you can understand string theory as mind. Understanding string theory as mind solves all of the major problems that we're having in social and political philosophy.
Okay, so I
That's the
understand your
argument.
argument now. So that's a much clearer explanation of what your argument is. But I don't. There's nothing in string theory or understanding string theory as a mind that solves any of that. But you can claim it. Well, where does this? How does this solve anything?
Well, that's the argument. Again,
Well, that's the
Feynman
conclusion.
says that we
You said
can,
your conclusion is
okay,
that
that we can, sure. Then it's a matter of comparing. You're saying, I'm saying that understanding string theory as mind, or as an aspect of mind, leads to desirable outcomes, not only in understanding physics and understanding some of the biggest mysteries in physics, but also the biggest puzzles in other areas of science and philosophy. This is self-evidently better than an interpretation that leads to confusion, that does not lead to any implications about anything that matters, and certainly doesn't lead to the solution to the human predicament of extinction.
what? Because again, I'm saying everything without the God, without the mind, seems to be able to do this better. So what problem does the mind thing solve that the non-mind doesn't solve?
Again, the mathematics and the voting theory. Let me summarize the voting theory problem, right? The voting theory at the moment is, say you and I have disagreements, right? You and I are having a disagreement today, right? We're disagreeing.
Sure.
So this is common. This is a basic reality of human interaction. Humans disagree about the future,
Sure.
right? And so this disagreement is resolved on a social level through political theory. And in the West, primarily through different forms of democracy or republicanism, right?
Sure.
So at the moment, you and I have a disagreement. So what democracy or our current best understanding or best practices in political theory say that if you and I have a disagreement, we come together to vote, right? My vote is one, your vote is one. That's how we solve this agreement. We know from Arrow's theorem and we know from practical everyday reality that this way of resolving problems resolving our differences has major problems in many different areas. Okay, so going back to your early question, how does understanding string theory as mind resolve this problem? Through common sense, through a long chain of logic and science, of course, through common sense in the following way. If two people come together to build a house, one of those persons puts in 99% of the work, and the other person puts in 1% of the work. And they're able-bodied, right? They're free, they're normal, they're equal in every other way, except one of them puts 99% of the work, the other one puts 1% of the work. Okay, so then they have a difference about what should be done with the house. So the question is, how do we resolve that difference? What do you
Yeah.
think is a good solution to that?
Well, there's lots of different good solutions to that. It kind of depends.
Well,
Like
give me one.
one would be like socialism. The one who did the work gets the house. The people own the means of production. Another one would be is the guy who paid for it gets the house. So if I pay a worker to build my house, then I get to keep the house, even though I didn't do most of the work. So there's lots of different models that solve that. Like,
Okay, so let's say the one who put in 99% of the work also put in 99% of the capital, and the other one put in 1% and 1% of the work and 1% of the capital. Which ones of those two should, or how should the difference about the house be resolved?
The guy who did the 99% should get the majority of the house.
Common sense, right?
Sure.
Yet we live under a political system in the West, dominates in the West, that no, they each should have one vote. This is asinine. It's a dumb idea, and it's going to cause orders of magnitude more death on the planet, my prediction, than all of the socialist wars combined in history, because it's a very, very dumb idea. So,
Democracy will cause more deaths than socialism.
yeah, I think not democracy, the idea that people can come together and have equal votes. That's a
Democracy.
that's a very that's a very dumb idea. Yes. That's a
Uh,
very dumb idea. From Arrow demonstrated that as democracy, that it's a dumb idea. From the beginning of history, it's been known as a dumb idea. And I just demonstrated to you in an example that it's a dumb idea by analogy. If one person is putting in 99% of the work and 99% of the capital, why should the person who puts only 1% capital and 1% of the work get half of the goods? It doesn't make no sense.
the
Makes
point
absolutely no sense.
the point of voting is to make an incentive for people in power in order to adjudicate their policies, and so that they don't get too powerful and too corrupt. So the point of voting, like voting, really doesn't do much of anything. The whole point of voting is just to make sure that the people in the leadership have to accommodate some mitigating force so that they don't just do whatever they want. That's all it's doing. So it's not like you don't get a house. Like the person who's voting doesn't get a house. All they're doing is um, essentially is just being a ball and chain for politicians to make them not be able to do whatever they want. So it's not, voting isn't like magic house ownership.
No, you're going to the wrong level of abstraction. Voting resolves differences. The purpose of voting is to resolve differences. Voting as it is now in the United States or in Europe, yes, I agree. Voting doesn't do all of these things, but at the right level of abstraction, voting resolves differences. This is what voting theory does. It's how to, in fact, this is what social choice theory as an academic discipline is all about. It's how do we aggregate different preferences that people have. This is exactly what it's about.
Yeah, yeah, I understand
Okay,
that.
we
So
might
like,
argue that okay, the
so,
electoral college in the U.S. has different functions. No, it's on a different level of
right,
abstraction.
right. So I agree with you that voting is a way to settle differences. And so if you have a society that's built by, say, like 10 people do all of the work to build a society, and 100 people live in it, and the 90% of people who didn't do anything all get an equal vote, then they'll get to take ownership of the 10% who actually did all of the work. Right. I think that's unfair. I totally agree. Um, so what? What does this have to do with God?
Again, the math that comes from understanding string theory as mind, Aharonov as part of that mind, gives us the mathematics that resolves this common sense um, problems with voting theory, and more importantly, or maybe just as importantly, resolves academically, statistically, mathematically, Arrow's impossibility theorem, and a whole host of other problems that we have in social and political philosophy.
Okay. So you're,
That's the difference between saying, okay, transhumanism can save us, and understanding the universe, understand that we're made in the image of God, how that will save us.
well, again, those are two completely different things. God can help save us from voting theory, and God can cure humanity of death, are two completely separate things. Um, so
No, I see them as the same.
the same.
Because I see them as the same because you're positing that transhumanism can get us out of the predicament that we're in at the moment, but you're not saying how. I'm telling you exactly how.
By making human
Through
beings immortal with
no. by resolving the contradictions and paradoxes that exist in our current understanding of voting theory and political philosophy. Again, because we're borrowing the math not from conjecture, not from philosophy, we're borrowing it from physics and string
What
theory.
does solving voting theory have to do with preventing extinction?
Has everything to do with preventing extinction, because we know from experience that people aren't equal, right? So we put on a continuum of people most likely to get rid of nuclear weapons and least likely to get rid of nuclear weapons. So if you put the right mechanisms and voting theory into practice, what you get, or what you want to get, are the people that are least likely to want to destroy humanity.
Yeah.
So that's how
Democracy does that pretty well.
it seems contradictory. Then why is the planet full of nuclear weapons?
Because much of the world doesn't have democracy, like China, and Russia, and North Korea.
Okay, so you say democracy does that pretty well, but there's China is not a democracy.
What?
China's not a democracy,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So there's a conflict. There's a conflict there. China's a nuclear power. The U.S. is a nuclear power.
Yep.
There's a conflict of ideas there, and the potential outcome of that conflict could be human extinction. Could be, right? And so we have two options. We can approach this problem democratically, or we can approach this problem through the Chinese conception of government, right? There's two different models, and they're irreconcilable, right? But this is a reality that we're living in, but that has to be resolved, or it doesn't have to be resolved. But if we want to minimize the threat of human extinction, then it behooves us to resolve that.
Yeah.
Correct?
Sure. What does this have to do
And
with God?
This has everything to do with God, because again, the mathematics that comes from understanding string theory as mind provides the mathematics that resolves the problems in voting theory and in common sense approach to how to govern ourselves and reality.
Okay, so your argument is that understanding string theory as having a mind provides math.
No. Understanding string theory in a framework of mind.
Yeah, same thing. So
No,
understanding string theory.
String theory doesn't have a mind.
Yeah, obviously the model doesn't. This is just, I'm not saying it exactly specifically, just in general. So string theory has a mind in it somewhere. Like the model entails mindness exists. All right, so if you understand that string theory entails a mind in it somewhere, then you get math that can solve the voting problem so people can vote to eliminate nuclear weapons, therefore God.
No, the therefore God is that we don't have the ability to do this ourselves. We can't do it ourselves. We need help. And therefore,
why would that mean that God exists? Like, even if we can't do it ourselves, it could just be impossible to do. Like, there could still be no God.
Sure. Then it's a matter of testing. If humans make it through the next, whatever, 100, 200, 500 years, 1,000 years, and everything is just hunky-dory, my argument goes to shit.
Okay.
My argument goes to shit. Okay.
That's perfect. Falsifiability. I love falsifiability. That is.
I'm willing to concede that.
Okay.
However, the argument is that just as has been predicted for 2,000 years within Christianity, that's not going to be the end. The end is going to come through global cataclysm. That's how the end of this era, so to speak, and the salvation, because some people are going to make it through that cataclysmic series of events. And there's lots of evidence that it's possible. It's not guaranteed that it's possible. We could make it through this climate crisis and everything else that we're facing as threats, We could make it through unscathed. Maybe we're going to be better than ever. In which case, I would argue there's no need for God. Okay, but if what some people are predicting is going to come about, then we're going to have an increasing amount of chaos on the planet. After that chaos, the idea is that God's going to intervene to get us through that problem. Some people won't accept it. Because once again, going back to the original argument, many, many times it's an emotional argument. It's not a rational argument. Because if a person is rational and purely objective and sees, okay, humanity is under a threat, we have to get out of it. And somebody is presenting a plan to get out of it, but the person says, oh, no, your plan sucks. But they don't have a plan B, then I would argue this is purely emotional or spiritual, but it's not rational.
Well, I mean, that's there's not a problem with that. So, like, if I say we're starving to death on an island, and your plan is to burn all of the remaining food, I'd say that's a stupid plan. Like, I don't have a solution, but that plan is a dumb plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to me like what you're doing. Like, you're saying, we don't have a solution to prevent humanity from destroying itself. Therefore, let's make up an invisible sky daddy who can do it.
No, because nothing's being made up here. I'm actually solving. Not me, but the understanding is solving some actual problems in science. I'm not making anything up. I'm actually solving actual problems in science, and
Yeah.
furthermore, I'm predicting what's going to happen.
Sure. So, like, if it actually solved problems, which I don't think it does, and I don't think anybody in physics thinks it does, like that's fine. I'm totally fine with having new things that solve problems in physics. I think that's a good thing, but I don't see, like, there could still, even if your model solved the problems in physics, that doesn't show it actually does anything to help humanity. But it seems like the way you think your model would help humanity is if we adopted this model, then we would institute a voting system which would put people in power who would vote out nuclear weapons. That's how the God model would save us.
That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, more neutral, is that we would synchronize our social and political systems with the physics and math of nature. Because maybe a couple of concepts will help here. At the very fundamental level of physics, there is attraction and repulsion. In fact, at the outset of the scientific revolution, Isaac Newton opened up the preface to his Principia Mathematica, and he said, this is my, I'm paraphrasing here, he said, this is my best effort to understand nature. It's a poor effort. I wish I could understand attraction and repulsion, because my gut feeling is that this is the essence of nature, attraction and repulsion. Interestingly enough, several centuries later, we're still faced with the same mystery. We don't know what gravity and dark energy are, right? Gravity and repulsion remain the central mysteries of nature. So going back to the idea that there's a symmetry between how the mind works, or how an animal brain works, and how nature works. Morality is ultimately an attraction and a repulsion. All morality is based on attracting. Some people are attracted to some things and repulsed by others. This is the essence of morality, right?
So how does tying in our political theory to physics solve any problems?
I'm trying to answer that.
What
it does is synchronize our social and political systems physically and mathematically with the physics and math that governs nature.
And why do you think this is going to give us salvation?
Because it resolves the biggest mysteries or the biggest open questions in voting theory and in common sense about how to resolve our differences.
Why do
About
you think this is going to solve the problem of humans going to die? Like, how does solving our differences have anything to do with prolonging humans' existence?
what it doesn't directly have anything to do with prolonging human existence.
Wasn't
That
that
would
the
be
original question? Like, we're asking,
that
like,
would be
how do you,
transhumanism. That would be transhumanism.
wasn't that like your
Transhumanism
original
is
point? Was the whole argument is that we need God to give us salvation to keep humans alive?
okay. That's different. To keep humans alive is different than to prolong human life. Transhumanism is about prolonging human life. Okay, my point is it's a subtle point, but it's an important point because it's
So,
very
so
different.
keeping humans alive is different than prolonging human life.
Yeah, it's very different because transhumanism says nothing about how, in the short term, we get nuclear weapons off of the planet. Okay, so
Right. You would just
transhumanism
make
is
it so
about
nuclear weapons
prolonging
can't
human
kill
life.
anyone. So if it's physically impossible for nuclear weapons to kill anyone, then it doesn't matter if they're on the Earth.
Well, not necessarily because that would get rid of nuclear weapons, but it wouldn't resolve the problems with, for example, genetic engineering or with other kinds of war. It resolves one type of warfare, but not all kinds of warfare.
It would resolve all of them. So if it's physically impossible for gene manipulation or war to kill us, then it doesn't matter if they're here.
No, but we don't know that it's physically impossible for gene manipulation or for other types of new technology to kill us. That's a hope. That's no different than Christianity in that sense.
Well,
I hope we're able to forever protect ourselves from death. That's just like Christian hope. Then
yes,
it's no
technology is
different.
the only thing that's ever worked to do this. So that is the most reliable method to infer as the one that could actually do this.
Well, sure, that makes sense in within the time frame that we're living. It makes sense, but again, it's just hope.
It's
It's
induction.
not.
It's not hope. It's saying like this method has worked and it's the best method we've had in the past that's ever worked. So if you want to
Yeah,
present a new method, you would
I
need
don't think
some.
we disagree. I don't think we disagree about that because ultimately what I'm offering is science anyway, but I'm offering a different way of understanding the science in a way that makes sense, that other interpretations don't make sense.
Well, I like that you presented a falsifiability criterion. You said that if humanity keeps going for like the next 300, 500 years or whatever without destroying, then your model is falsified. I think that's probably going to happen. So I think that your model will be falsified. And so I'm happy with that. But I'm happy to wrap up. It was nice chatting with you. It was a pleasant conversation. I'm going to get some food. So do you have anything? Do
Okay,
you
I
want to tell
appreciate
people?
it.
Do you want to tell people where they could find you, like your podcast or links or anything?
Sure. Well, the channel goes under my name, Luis Razo Bravo. I'm on YouTube, and you can find me just by searching through the name. I take on some of the biggest open questions in physics, philosophy, and especially management. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who would like to talk about these things. So I appreciate it. What about you, Tom? Can you tell
Yeah,
us
I
about yourself and
do.
what you do?
Yeah, I'm a YouTuber. I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/TJump. I debate professors and philosophers, theists on reasons to believe in God, philosophy, epistemology, morality, that kind of stuff. That's what I do. Thanks again for chatting. It was a pleasant conversation, and talk to you later.
I appreciate